Clicking on the General Information item here in the main window takes us to the General Information Worksheet, which is on the screen right now. The General Information Worksheet is a starting point and a collection area for much of the basic information that appears again and again on the forms and worksheets. A good example being the names of the parties or the case number. These two items appear for identification purposes at the top of nearly every form in MA. I'm going to start by completing some of these fields so you can see how it's done. Notice that when you look at any worksheet for the first time, the focus is always in the first input box on that form. In the context of the General Information Worksheet, that would be the county field. You begin by typing in Medina, as I am here. When you're done, you press the Tab key to proceed to the next input field. Doing so takes me to the case number field, where I'll type in the case number. Now, in a nutshell, it's as simple as that. You tab from field to field, entering the required information. All that I'll add is, while of course you can use your mouse to check and uncheck boxes, it's just as easy, and if you're a touch typist and you already have your hands on the keyboard, to use the space bar. Pressing the space bar once places a check mark in the box, and pressing it a second time removes the check. I'll demonstrate by moving to the Dissolution field, and with the focus on the checkbox, pressing the space bar puts a checkbox there. And if I press the space bar again, I remove the check. Also, while I'm on the subject of the Tab key, here's a little known secret. Most everyone knows that if you press the Tab key, you move forward from field to field on a form or in a Windows dialog, for example. This is common knowledge among computer users. I think even old-time DOS users like myself refrain from using the Enter key in favor of the Tab key. However, many users don't know that if you hold the Shift key down while you press Tab, you go backwards. I've seen some users who needed to go back to a previous field and they would tap the Tab key about 50 times to cycle around on the form to get where they wanted to go. That's a lot of extra and unnecessary keystrokes when all they really had to do was hold down the Shift key and press the Tab key once or twice and they're there. Obviously, if you want to jump to a new location on a page, that's probably a good time to use the mouse. But for most other navigation, especially on a form screen like this one where you want to proceed in an orderly manner through the form, tabbing and shift tabbing from field to field are the way to go. I'm not going to have you watch me make all the entries on the General Information Worksheet. Instead, I'm going to open a sample file that we created that has entries in it already. To do that, I'll use the Close Active Window button to return to the main window, then click on the Open File button to open the CLE sample file. It's asking me if I want to save my changes, and I don't. Then I'm going to select the file and open it. I'll tell you two things about this file. Number one, we prepared it specifically for this CLE course. And two, it's available as an MAB file that you can download. It's there with the downloadable materials that I've been referring to, and open the file in your MA 2010 program if you want to follow along or consult after watching this video. Of course, that assumes that you own MA 2010 or have downloaded the free demo. Now that I've opened the sample file, I'm going to go back to the General Information Worksheet, and you'll see that all the fields are already filled in. I'm not sure who at Purita Springs prepared the sample file, but it looks like we're running afoul of the disclaimer we made about resemblance to persons living or dead. At any rate, I'm paging down on the General Information Worksheet because there are some things I do want to call your attention to. The first is the Divorce/Dissolution section right here. This section is important because it sets the path MA will take when it's calculating child support. The parenting arrangement will determine which of the two child support worksheets will be used. For example, the sole shared parenting worksheet or the split parental worksheet. And also the health insurance boxes tell MA which final child support figure to use because the child support varies depending on whether the kids are covered by health insurance or not. And in the case of the sole residential parenting worksheet, The checkboxes tell MA which variation of that worksheet to use, in other words, the sole residential part of it or the shared parenting part of it. The final part of the general information worksheet, here at the bottom, has space for entering up to 10 children. In the context of the child support calculation, you'll want to make sure that you fill out this section carefully. Things to be aware of: number one, if you don't have something in the name field here, MA doesn't count that child, even if you've entered other information like social security number and date of birth. In other words, the triggering field denoting the existence of a child is the name field. I don't think every child field is critical like the name field is. For example, I don't believe social security is used in a calculatory sense. However, I think of it from the standpoint that I'd rather have the information and not need it than to need the information and not have it. So it's probably a good idea to complete all the child fields completely. That being said, let me call your attention to the date of birth field. A child will not be considered in MA's child support calculation unless the date of birth field yields an age less than 18 years. Now, sometimes there are extenuating circumstances and a child over 18 is eligible for child support. If you've got a situation like that, it will be necessary to trick MA by entering a birth date that makes the child less than 18. Now, the remaining columns to the right are related to income tax issues. They're important because the Spousal Support Statute, ORC 3118C1 Factor L, says specifically that the tax consequences of spousal support payments for each party must be considered. Consequently, with respect to the last three columns, the child tax credit, the earned income credit, and the child care credit, those are our tax-specific items. You should notice the two asterisks right here. They refer to the basic rule stated down there at the bottom of the page, which is, if you're not sure, check the box, because MA will typically flag it if it's not supposed to be checked. In that regard, I'd like to call your attention again to the check file button that I referred to earlier. If you have a box checked that should not be checked, the check file function will let you know. So again, when in doubt, leave the tax boxes checked. You'll notice that MA checks these boxes by default anyway. Therefore, you only need to override and uncheck them in the event you have specific tax information indicating that the child is ineligible for the tax issues in question. MA has a rather complete federal and state tax calculator built into it, so most of the time it's going to have the right answer for you. That's because it's programmed with all the rules regarding whether someone is eligible for the child care or the child tax credit, for example. However, when you consider a subject like the earned income credit, you'll discover that the IRS has several worksheets and a 65-page instructional booklet. So it's really unrealistic to think that MA is infallible. If you have doubts about a child's eligibility, it's not that hard to check these things out. It may help to know that all of the relevant IRS publications are available from MA's help menu. Another option may be plugging the taxpayer's facts into a more sophisticated single-purpose tax program like TurboTax, for example. That's the reason those tax-related checkboxes are overridable. You can tell that from the aqua-colored halo around the checkbox when you tab to it. If you need to override a field, you simply go to the Options menu and select Override. There are other ways you can override an entry. One is to double-click in the field. I think that may only work in text box fields. Another is to use Control-E as an accelerator key combination. So the bottom line is, if you're a tax whiz and you know that a child is not eligible for one reason or another, override and uncheck the box. That concludes the general information section, and the next topic will be income.